this week's drive, we get swamped, and worse, by a horde of Porsches. Join the world champion on a white-knuckle ride. Scratch some paint, and worse, with Heinz Harald. And go back 50 years in time and still crash. All this and more in this week's Drive. The famous Monza circuit staged the first race of a new series called the Le Mans Endurance. Cars normally only seen at the 24-hour of Le Mans are eligible, and the Audi R8 of Johnny Herbert and Jamie Davies took an early lead from the similar car of Alan McNish and Pierre Caffer. Herbert and McNish are both ex-Formula One drivers. German Caffer is a former DTM driver, and during the race he and McNish led the Zytek, driven by Stefan Johansson, David Brabham and Andy Wallace, which had started on pole, with early leaders Herbert and Davies in third place. The race involved both sports prototypes and GT cars. It was one of the less powerful Porsche GT3s from the team led by Joel Camathias, which ended the day for American John Fields' Lola Judd. The Lola was forced to retire on lap 43, while the Porsche lasted only 4 more laps. Before long, a round of pit stops normalised the order, and the 88 car of Herbert and Davies took over at the front, leading McNish in the number 8 car. Another Audi, driven by Tom Christensen, ran in third place and would finish a lap down on the leaders. Midway through the 1,000-kilometre 5-hour race, clouds rolled in and the sudden heavy rain forced drivers into the pits for unscheduled stops to change to wet weather tyres. And those in open-top cars would wish for a roof. In fact, the aerodynamics on open-top cars is usually good enough that drivers don't actually get wet until they stop. However, pools of water on the track, plus the spray kicked up by cars ahead, added a new dimension to the race. In trying to stay in third place, Christensen was having trouble getting past the TVR of Richard Stanton. Alan McNish made short work of the Dallara Judd of Rob Bath. A gentle tap sent the Dallara off the track, but the team recovered to finish 5th, 5 laps down on the winners. Herbert and Davies received the checkered flag after 173 laps in 5 hours, 5 minutes and 52 seconds, only 66 hundredths ahead of McNish and Caffer. The winner and runner-up in each category, prototype and GT, will qualify to compete in the Le Mans 24-hour race in June next year.
No, exactly. You know, it was an important one because we've seen how quick the Zytek has been going. It's been very, second pole position. It was very quick in the race, very difficult to pass for us. So I think in other races, Nürburgring, for example, I think it's going to be a big fight and very difficult to beat them. So these points are very important towards that championship. But it's good morale for the guys and for going into Le Mans.
The Le Mans Endurance season consists of 4 races. The next is at Nürburgring in July, then Silverstone in August, with the season ending in September at Spa in Belgium. The more showroom-oriented European Touring Car Series had its 4th round at Hockenheim, and in the first race of the day, Spaniard Antonio Garcia's BMW led the similar car of Briton Andy Priaulx into the first corner. The opening lap was enlivened when Brazil's Augusto Farfus ran into the back of his teammate, Gabriele Tarquini, and also hit his other teammate, Fabrizio Giovanardi. Farfus retired on the spot, and his teammates only lasted a handful of laps before also retiring. With the Alphas gone, it was left to the Seat, driven by Jordi Genet, to challenge the BMWs of Garcia, Priaulx and Dirk Müller, with another German, Frank Diefenbacher, in a second Seat, hanging on to the leaders. Priaulx seized the lead from Garcia on lap 3 after swapping 3 times in as many corners. Then Garcia spun off on lap 8, putting him down to 8th place. Up front, Priaulx pulled away from Dirk Müller with Genet's Seat behind, and the Briton took the first heat, his second in a row. Genet's 3rd place was Seat's first podium of the season, and Swede Rickard Rydell claimed 8th position and pole position for the second race. 5 cars were missing from Heat 2, including the Alphas of Giovanardi and Farfus. Pole sitter on the reverse grid, Rydell made a good start and led, but he was outbraked by Garcia on the first lap. Jörg Muller was leading the rest of the field with Diefenbacher, his brother Dirk, Rangoni, Priaulx and Genet close behind. On lap 2, Diefenbacher locked up his wheels and ran wide, damaging the rear bumper and losing 2 places. On lap 6, Priaulx slowed with damage after a collision and retired on the following lap. Up front, the leaders, Garcia and the Muller brothers, were in a close fight. On lap 9, Garcia slipped to 3rd, passed by both the Mullers. On lap 10, the brothers collided, and on the next lap, Dirk tried again, but Jörg shut the door. Garcia took advantage and muscled his way to finish 2nd between them. Meanwhile, the DTM German touring cars were racing in Italy. Swede Matthias Ekström of the Audi Sport team grabbed an early lead, as Jean Alesi lost 2nd place to Mercedes teammate Christian Albers. Veteran Bernd Schneider had trouble from the start, beginning with a damaged tyre on the first lap. Ex-Formula One driver Heinz-Harald Frentzen spun his Opel on lap 3 after contact with Christian Abt, but stayed in contention. Someone in Frank Bieler's pit will be going back to wheel-changing school after this lap 7 incident left the German on 3 legs. Former champion Schneider made his first regular pit stop on lap 18. Ekström made his second pit stop on lap 24, but managed to keep the lead. He was giving Audi their best showing yet in their first season back as a factory-backed team. Behind him, Hollander Albers in his AMG Mercedes overtook ex-Formula One pilot Jean Alesi on lap 30, and then Briton Gary Paffett passed the Frenchman to go 3rd. But their team boss Norbert Haug wanted P1 as well. The hapless Frentzen was still having more trouble, this time damaging the front wing of his battle-scarred Opel, and then watching Schneider go past him to go 11th. His team has been getting their fair share of practice in patching up his car this season. Ekström took Audi's first win by 3 seconds from Albers, and on lap 42, Alesi had reclaimed 3rd place from Paffett, another 7 seconds further back.
I'm very happy. I mean, already in Estoril we were very close to a win, and I had a lot of revenge feeling in my body.
Albers now has 26 points to Ekström's 24. The French racing city of Le Mans was the scene of the 3rd round of this year's MotoGP season. After the washout at Jerez 2 weeks before, most riders were hoping for dry weather to make the most of the long straights and hard-braking corners at the circuit. Before the race, Ducati rider Loris Capirossi enjoyed a performance of the Moulin Rouge in Paris with local rider Randy Depunier, leader of the 250cc World Championship. Back in the paddock, attention centred on the Sette Gibernau Max Biaggi-Valentino Rossi clash. Biaggi was given a cake by his team to celebrate his 100th podium finish in Jerez. 4 times a World 250 champion, he has his best chance yet to claim the Premier title this year, as arch-rival and multiple champion Rossi has switched to the struggling Yamaha team. Gibernau leads the standings by a single point from Biaggi for the first time.
It's a new thing for me, and it's nice. I've been waiting for a long time to be in a situation like this, and really it feels good. So hopefully we'll be able to cope with the extra pressure, and we'll be able to do a good Grand Prix here.
Rossi promised a fight after his 4th place in Spain, his first finish off the podium since August 2002. Colin Edwards was the surprise pace setter, taking provisional pole position in first qualifying. The Texan Tornado, the 2002 World Superbike champion with Honda, was expected to pose a real threat this season after a move from Aprilia back to Honda. But after 2 7th positions at Velcom and Jerez, the Texan needs something to happen at Le Mans, a circuit of which he has little experience. It's the same for fellow American Nicky Hayden. The 2003 MotoGP rookie was expected to win in his 2nd season, but after a couple of below-par finishes, 2nd on the grid comes just at the right time. Here, he's almost under the paint on his tank as he's trying to get the best lap time he can. A Yamaha fills the last spot on the provisional front row, but not with the number you would have expected. Carlos Checa had to settle for 3rd fastest after the Spaniard had dominated for much of the session. Marco Melandri continued his impressive start to the season, lapping as the second quickest Yamaha in 4th place. Next to Melandri is Jerez GP winner and championship leader Sete Gibernau, 0.02 of a second behind. Completing the provisional second row is Biaggi's Japanese teammate Makoto Tamada. With tobacco advertising not welcome in France, teams have alternative bodywork and leathers without the offending logos. To everyone's surprise, world champ Valentino Rossi only managed 7th fastest. Much of the problem came from the handling of his Yamaha, or the lack of it. But importantly, his rival Biaggi qualified only 8th. Sebastian Porto looked all set to clinch his second pole position in succession after a record-breaking lap in the 250cc class. The Argentinian rider, who started from pole at Jerez, held off local favourite and early championship leader Randy de Punier by a relatively comfortable margin of 1/3 of a second, and Manuel Poggiali was 3rd quickest. In the 125s, Andrea Dovizioso beat his own pole time from last season by almost a second ahead of Jorge Lorenzo. The teenagers are joined by veteran Yuichi Wii, the only rider in the class to have won at this circuit. However, in final qualifying the next day, Gibernau and Checa demonstrated Spanish domination of the MotoGP grid. Neither Edwards nor Hayden could improve their times in the hot and sticky conditions at the Bugatti circuit, but Gibernau shook off a fever to claim a new pole record. Yamaha rider Checa clinched 2nd place, joining Sete on the front row, the first time that 2 Spaniards have qualified in the top 2 positions for a Premier Class Grand Prix. Max Biaggi qualified 3rd fastest for Honda to clinch the final front row position, and happy to be ahead of Valentino Rossi, struggling in 4th place and lining up on the 2nd row of the grid for the first time since the 3rd round of last season at Jerez, a terrible position by his standards. Marco Melandri, 3rd Yamaha qualifier in the top 6, split the Hondas of Edwards and Hayden, who was knocked back to the 3rd row. Daniel Pedrosa of Spain claimed his first pole in the 250 class ahead of Aprilia riders Randy de Punier of France and Sebastian Porto, who crashed in the final minutes of the session. He wasn't hurt and would start 3rd. In the 125 class, championship leader Andrea Dovizioso, Spaniards Jorge Lorenzo and Hector Barbera, and Roberto Locatelli of Italy will make up the front row. Hondas thus claimed pole position in all 3 classes. As usual, there were a number of spectacular crashes and get-offs during qualifying, but there were no reports of any serious injuries, although some riders would have a few bruises and gravel rash when they lined up the next day. In the past, Rossi has called the Bugatti circuit a Yamaha track, but it wasn't his bike to the fore. Reigning World Superbike champion Neil Hodgson of Britain certainly won no friends for taking out Norik Abe and John Hopkins before the first lap had been completed. While Hodgson fractured 2 ribs in the pile-up, Hopkins broke his thumb to cap a miserable weekend. At the front, 2 Spaniards were jousting for the lead. Carlos Checa stayed ahead of Sete Gibernau. Behind them, Biaggi and Rossi were scrapping away for 3rd place. After biding his time, Gibernau made his move on the 12th lap, easing his Honda past Checa's Yamaha. But with 16 laps to go, a lot of hard work lay ahead. After a win in the opener in South Africa, Rossi was hoping to avoid a 2nd consecutive 4th place finish, mediocre by his standards. But no matter what Rossi did, Max had an answer. It wasn't to be a Yamaha track after all. Gibernau took the checkered flag 1.6 seconds ahead of Checa. Biaggi was less than 3/10 further back, with Rossi off the podium for only the 2nd time in 22 months.
Here it was a very hard race. I have to congratulate, of course, Carlos. He was very, very fast. He did no mistakes. And he did, I think, an unbelievable race also. At the end,
I was capable of overtaking him. I tried a little bit hard to put a little bit of a gap, and I knew that this race was going to be within tenths, so I just tried to keep the pace. My rear tire at the end was finished, but we were capable of still doing very good lap times, and this means that the team has done a very good job.
Honda riders claimed 1st, 3rd, 5th and all the alternating places down to 13th. The year is looking increasingly like going to Sete and not Max. No great drama in the 250s. Another win for another Spanish rider on another Honda. Daniel Pedrosa led from start to finish. He cruised in 7.7 seconds clear of Randy de Punier, and Tony Elias of Spain was 3rd under the flag. After his 2nd win from 3 starts, Pedrosa has closed to within 10 points of de Punier at the top of the overall standings. Looking at the slow-motion replay of Mike D'Amiglio's spill in the 125cc event, it's hard to believe that he could walk away from what looked like a major crash, but the French Aprilia rider did just that. In the 125s, 29-year-old former world champion Roberto Locatelli took control at the front of the race from 17-year-old Andrea Dovizioso, who stayed in touch, keeping right behind his compatriot. On more than one occasion, Locatelli invited the youngster to take the lead, using hand gestures to beckon him through, and even turning and seeming to talk to Dovizioso. In a thrilling finale to the race, Dovizioso snatched the lead from Locatelli on the last lap. Giving Honda a clean sweep of wins, Dovizioso extends his lead in the championship, although the lower positions couldn't be tighter. The next round is at Mugello in Italy. In wet conditions, 5-time Speedway world champion Tony Rickardsson crashed in heat 16 of 25, ending motionless with one arm tangled in his forks. However, the veteran Swede got back on his bike and fought through to the final, where he would meet arch-rival Jason Crump. The meeting was delayed by almost 2 hours after rain made the track dangerous, in the opinions of the riders. They requested that the top surface be scraped off and hoped that the rain would stop before the meeting started. By 9 p.m. local time, that was possible, and once again a Speedway Grand Prix produced racing and excitement of the highest quality. Crump led the final heat from flag to flag at Prague's Marketa Stadium, but he was chased all the way by Poland's Jaroslav Humpel and Rickardsson. Crump won his semi-final heat, but had come 2nd in earlier heats to both Humpel and fellow Australian Ryan Sullivan, who came last in the final. Well before the end of the 4-lap heat, Crump knew he'd beaten not only the other riders, but also the atrocious conditions. Whenever an Australian's racing, there are always Australian supporters, and they all seem to have Australian flags. The sport of speedway, gearless, brakeless racing on a dirt oval, actually originated in Australia over 60 years ago. Having done this before, and knowing that champagne in the ice really stings, Crump came prepared. He won the Czech Republic round for the 3rd successive year, giving the Australian a 7-point lead in the championship after 2 rounds. He finished 2nd in the opening Grand Prix in Sweden. Fellow Aussie Lee Adams, the winner in Stockholm, was eliminated in the semi-finals but is still 2nd overall. Most drivers can only dream of sitting behind the wheel of a sleek red Ferrari 360 Modena, but some Germans are finding that dreams really can come true.
We thought about it, that it would be good to retain students after they are finished with driving school, and we thought, how should we do this? Maybe with some kind of legendary car. And here, Ferrari was, of course, perfect. We offer the opportunity to bring the students back into the school and to drive with the instructor again. The chance to drive a Ferrari is, of course, very cool. And as instructors, we are professionals, and we have the ability to intervene at any time if there is a difficult situation for the student. But we have found that all the people are very careful with the car because they have so much respect for it. People treat this car much better than the car I usually use for teaching.
In most countries, using about 2/3 of this speedo would be illegal. There are some things about the Ferrari which are different to the average runabout, like the gearshift paddles behind the steering wheel. Other controls are more familiar. It's just what they're controlling that's so special. Like all German driving school vehicles, the car is fitted with a second set of foot pedals on the passenger side for the driving instructor in case of an emergency. The special Ferrari can be rented from one of several companies in Germany, and so far about 60 schools have offered their former students the chance to dream. Jolanta Herrig wanted a spin in the Red Devil and took the car on a leisurely drive through the countryside.
It was great, just wonderful, very exciting.
The chance to fulfill a dream and to become Michael Schumacher for an hour or two. And finally, The Motorcycle Diaries is a film based on the journal of revolutionary Ernesto Che Guevara and Alberto Granado as they traveled across South America in the early 1950s. In the movie, Brazilian director Walter Salles, best known for Behind the Sun and Central Station, tells the stories of that formative road trip which opened Che's eyes to poverty and injustice in Latin America and which inspired his commitment to revolution. In 1952, the two students left their native Argentina to ride through Latin America on a rickety Norton 500. One of them would go on to become a leader of the Cuban Revolution and an icon for generations of rebellious youths. His beret-wearing image emblazoned on countless posters and T-shirts all over the world. Salas said he wanted to show a tender side to the man often viewed as a ruthless guerrilla fighter.
Our intention was to talk about Ernesto before he became Che. And that definition isn't mine, it's his son Camilo's, who we found in Havana before starting the movie. He said, look, that story is about two men who depart on the road, and the initial adventure becomes something much more serious when they are shocked by the Latin American reality.
Che is portrayed as a lively but intense character. He tries to be honest with his girlfriend, while Alberto is always looking toward a new fling.
I think the result of that is very small within the extraordinary life that Guevara had.
The film chronicles their varied adventures as they reach a leper colony deep in the Peruvian Amazon. Che, a medical student, and Alberto, who studied biochemistry, stay there for 3 weeks working with the community.
He says he was born when he boarded that bike. It was a long trajectory, a period of evolution and transformation.
Granado, who is still alive, aged 82, and lives in Cuba, is played by Argentine Rodrigo de la Serna, coincidentally Che's second cousin.
We knew that making the movie was going to change us, that it was going to have such a strong impact on us, but we didn't know in which way, we didn't know how much, and the truth is, for me, it still is changing me. The trip still exists.
Salas made the journey 3 times for research, to pick locations, and 84 days of filming in 30 locations.
Each town has its own peculiarity and diversity. Undoubtedly, in each country, there will be subtle differences in the movie's reception and outcome.
At the end of the trip, the two went their separate ways. The Cuban Revolution, which Che would help lead, came 7 years later, and they would only see each other once again, a year after Fidel Castro took power. Che was executed in 1967 while attempting a revolution in Bolivia. So, whether you're a happy race winner, indulging a lifelong dream, or taking out your whole team, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.